Welcome to NibblePop Stories. Today I'm going to tell you the story of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Chapter 1. Jonathan Harker is a young lawyer from England. He travels to Transylvania for work. His job is to help Count Dracula buy a house in London. This is his first big task as a solicitor. Harker plans to write everything down. He wants to tell his fiancée, Mina Murray, all about his trip. Before leaving, Harker visits the British Museum. He reads about Transylvania. He learns that the area Count Dracula mentioned is in the far east of the country. It lies near the borders of Moldavia and Bukovina. The region is in the Carpathian Mountains, one of the least known parts of Europe. Harker cannot find Castle Dracula on any map. However, the town of Bistritz, which the Count mentioned, is well known. Transylvania has four main groups of people. In the south are the Saxons and Wallachs. The Wallachs are descendants of the ancient Dacians. In the west live the Magyars. In the eastern north are the Zekilis. Harker is going to meet the Zekilis, who claim descent from Attila and the Huns. He also reads that the Carpathians are full of superstitions. He plans to ask the Count about them. Harker leaves Munich on May 1st. He arrives in Vienna early the next morning. After a short stop in Budapest, he continues his journey. He senses he is leaving the Western world behind. That night, he reaches Klausenburg. He stays at the Hotel Royal. The next morning, Harker boards a train to Bistritz. The train runs late. From the window, he sees beautiful mountains and groups of peasants. By twilight, he arrives in Bistritz. Count Dracula told him to stay at the Golden Crown Hotel. The hotel feels old-fashioned, just what Harker wanted. When he arrives, the innkeeper gives him a letter from the Count. The letter welcomes Harker to the Carpathians. It tells him to take the next day's coach to the Borgo Pass. A carriage will meet him there to take him to the castle. That night at the hotel, Harker asks the owners if they can tell him anything about Dracula. Instead of answering, they cross themselves and seem too frightened to even speak his name. The next morning, just as Harker is preparing to leave, the landlady comes to his room, visibly upset. She begs him not to go, pleading with him to stay at least one more day. She reminds him it's the eve of St. George's Day, when evil is said to be strongest at midnight. Though touched by her concern, Harker explains he has no choice. He must leave, for this is important work. Finally, she gives him her crucifix necklace for protection. Though unsure about accepting it since he is Protestant, Harker takes it to avoid hurting her feelings. Before leaving, Harker notices that some of the peasants are watching him with worry. As they walk away, the crowd crosses themselves and makes a sign to protect against the evil eye. On the carriage ride, the other passengers treat him with the same concern and sympathy. The carriage driver arrives at the Borgo Pass an hour early. He tries to convince Harker that Dracula's coachman might not come tonight. He makes a suggestion that Harker should go with them to Bukovina instead. Just then, a black carriage pulled by four horses appears. It is driven by a tall man with a beard and glowing red eyes. The man takes Harker's bags and helps him into the carriage. As they race through the Borgo Pass, Harker hears the howling of dogs and wolves. The sound frightens him, but the strange driver seems unfazed. The moon shines brightly but is sometimes hidden by clouds. Along the way, strange blue flames appear on the roadside. At times, the driver stops the carriage and gets out. He tends to the small blue flames by encircling them with stones. During one of these moments, it looks as though the flame passes right through the driver's body. Later, the carriage is surrounded by a pack of wolves. Harker grows terrified, but the driver calmly drives them away. In fact, the wolves seem to obey him. Finally, they arrive at a massive crumbling castle. Its dark windows and broken walls stand eerily against the moonlit sky. Chapter 2. Harker is dropped off at the great castle of Dracula, where he is welcomed by the Count himself. The Count is a tall old man with a white moustache, dressed all in black. In spite of his apparent age, during their handshake, Harker notices that the Count's grip is unbelievably strong and that his hand is as cold as a corpse. Harker is shown his room and then brought to a dining room where a fine dinner awaits him. Harker gives him a letter from Mr. Hawkins, his boss. The letter says Mr. Hawkins can't travel because of gout, but trusts Harker completely to help the Count. The two men talk, although the Count eats nothing. While Harker eats, the Count asks about his trip and Harker tells him everything. Harker observes him carefully. He has a strong face with a hooked nose, high forehead, thick eyebrows, a cruel mouth with sharp white teeth sticking out over red lips, pale ears with pointed tops, and a strong chin. His hands are broad with short fingers, hairy palms, and long, sharp nails. When the Count leans close, Harker shudders. His breath smells bad, and it makes him feel sick. They sit quietly, and as dawn starts outside, wolves howl in the valley. Dracula calls them children of the night and seems to enjoy their sound. Then the Count tells Mr. Harker to rest and leaves him to sleep. The next morning, Mr. Harker finds a cold breakfast waiting, but no servants or bells to call for help. The castle is full of expensive things, but feels empty and strange. There are also no mirrors anywhere in the house. He finds a library filled with English books and newspapers. After some time, the Count enters. He says the books helped him learn about England, a country he loves and wants to live in. Harker asks about the blue flames he saw the night before. The Count explains that they appear once a year and show the location of hidden treasure from old wars. The Count then asks about the house in London that Harker found for him. Harker takes out his papers and reads his notes about the estate called Carfax in Purfleet. It's an old, large property surrounded by a stone wall. There are trees, a pond, and a medieval house next to an old chapel. A lunatic asylum is nearby, but it can't be seen from the house. The Count likes that it's old and includes a chapel. Dracula tells Harker that he has learned English by reading newspapers and magazines. Still, he feels his English is not good enough. He wants Harker to stay at the castle as long as possible to help him improve his language skills so he can blend in with the English people. That night, they talk over dinner. The Count, again, does not eat. Harker later goes to his room and sleeps for a few hours. In the morning, he uses his small mirror to shave. When the Count suddenly appears behind him, Harker notices something strange. Dracula has no reflection. Startled, Harker cuts himself with the razor. Seeing the blood, the Count seems possessed. but calms down when his hand touches Harker's crucifix. After breakfast, Harker explores the castle. He discovers it sits on the edge of a huge cliff. On the south side, the drop from the window is at least 1,000 feet. Harker realizes that he is a prisoner in Dracula's home. Chapter 3. Harker spies on the Count. He sees him making the bed and setting the table for dinner. There are no servants in the castle. Harker begins to wonder if the coachman who brought him here was actually Dracula in disguise. That night, Dracula shares the history of his family. He tells stories of war and battles against the Turks when the people of Transylvania were united under one of his ancestors. Later, Dracula tells Jonathan that he must stay at the castle for another month to help him with business matters. Although Harker is frightened by the idea, he realizes he has no choice but to agree. Dracula also tells him to write only about business in his letters home, making it clear he will read them first. Harker writes a long, formal letter to Mr. Hawkins and another to his fiancée, Mina. He uses shorthand in Mina's letter, knowing she can read it, but Dracula cannot. That night, Harker looks out over the castle walls and sees Dracula crawling down the side of the building like a lizard. Another night, Harker explores the castle and pushes through a broken door. He finds a large part of the castle he hadn't seen before. There, he falls asleep. Three women appear in front of him. Harker isn't sure if he is dreaming or not. He feels both afraid and strangely drawn to them. One fair woman leans over him, and he feels her warm breath on his neck as her sharp teeth touch his skin, and he closes his eyes in pleasure. Dracula suddenly appears. He pulls the women away and says Harker belongs to him. He promises the women they can have Harker later after he is finished with him. Then Dracula gives them a small bag, one that moves as if a child is inside. Horrified, Harker loses consciousness. Chapter 4. The next morning, Harker wakes up in his own bed. A few days later, Dracula tells him to write 3 letters, dated June 12th, June 19th, and June 29th. The first letter should say that his work is nearly finished, the second that he has left the castle, and the third that he has arrived safely in Bistritz. Harker understands that these letters are meant to buy time for Dracula. Once the final date passes, Dracula will likely kill him. Still, Harker writes them. He sees no other choice. Meanwhile, a group of gypsies arrives at the castle. Hoping to reach Mina, Jonathan drops letters from his window, each with a gold coin attached. He hopes a gypsy will mail them. Instead, one takes the letters straight to Dracula. Dracula shows Harker the letters and burns them. Days later, Harker finds that his clothes and papers have been stolen. Weeks go by, more gypsies come, and Harker sees them unloading large wooden boxes from a wagon. Almost a month later, he watches as more boxes are brought into the castle. A week after that, he sees Dracula crawling down the wall again, this time wearing Harker's clothes. Jonathan realizes this trick will make people believe he traveled back to Bistritz, hiding the fact that he disappeared at Dracula's castle. Harker also notices Dracula is carrying the same sack used earlier to deliver the child to the three vampire women. Hours later, Jonathan sees a woman banging on the castle gates. She cries out, "Monster, give me my child!" Then he hears Dracula whisper from a high tower. A pack of wolves rushes through the gates and kills the woman. Harker gets desperate. He decides to search for Dracula during the day. He climbs out of his window and makes his way down to Dracula's room. In the vaults below, he finds 50 boxes filled with earth. In one of them, Dracula is lying still in a trance. Harker feels terrified. He climbs back up to his room. On June 29th, the date on the last letter, Dracula tells Harker he is free to go. But when he opens the door, he finds the courtyard full of hungry wolves. That night, Jonathan hears Dracula speaking to the three vampire women, promising that they can have him the following night. On 30th June, Harker wakes early and returns to the Count's room. Dracula is asleep and looks younger. Blood is trickling from the corners of his mouth. Harker lifts a shovel to kill him, but Dracula's eyes open and the hypnotic stare makes Jonathan lose control. He stumbles back upstairs. Then he hears the gypsies moving the boxes, one of which holds Dracula, getting ready to take them to England. Now Harker knows for certain he is completely alone, still a prisoner, and Dracula is heading to England to spread his evil. Harker decides he must try to escape. Chapter 5. In England, Mina Murray, Harker's fiancée, and Lucy Westenra are best friends. They exchange letters about their love lives. Mina works as an assistant schoolmistress and wants to be useful to her future husband, so she learns shorthand and typewriting. She is happy that Harker is finally on his way home. Lucy, meanwhile, has several men who want to marry her. One is Dr. John Seward, the director of a lunatic asylum in London. Another is a wealthy American named Quincy Morris. But Lucy has given her heart to a gentleman named Arthur Homewood, and she has accepted his proposal. Dr. Seward is disappointed that Lucy turned him down, but he tries to distract himself by focusing on a new and unusual patient, a man named Renfield. Mina visits the beautiful seaside town of Whitby with her friend Lucy. Nearby, there is a ruined abbey that people say is haunted by a white lady. The town's church has a large graveyard. An elderly local man named Mr. Swales becomes friends with the two girls and shares stories about the area. He tells them that many of the graves in the churchyard are actually empty because the people they were meant for were lost at sea. Even with the peaceful surroundings, Mina misses Harker deeply. He still hasn't come home, and she hasn't received a letter from him in a long time. Meanwhile, Dr. John Seward spends time with his strange patient, Renfield. Renfield has a habit of eating living creatures. He starts by catching flies with sugar, then feeds the flies to spiders and the spiders to sparrows. He enjoys watching one creature feed on another and believes he gains strength by eating them himself. Seward calls him a life-eating maniac. Back in Whitby, Mina grows more worried, both about Jonathan's silence and about Lucy, who has started sleepwalking again, just like she did as a child. One day, while walking with Mr. Swales, he tells Mina he feels that his own death may be near. Together, they see a Russian ship offshore, drifting strangely as if no one is steering it. Chapter 7. That Russian ship, Demeter, is washed ashore by a terrible storm. The entire crew is missing. Only the captain is found, dead, tied to the wheel and holding a crucifix in his hands. The ship's only cargo is a group of large wooden boxes which are later delivered to a local solicitor in Whitby. The ship's log tells the story of a doomed voyage. The Demeter left from the Russian port of Varna. About 10 days into the journey, one of the crew members vanished without a trace. Another sailor claimed he saw a tall man on board, someone who clearly wasn't part of the crew. Soon after, more sailors began to disappear, one by one. As the ship neared England, a thick fog surrounded it, making it impossible to navigate. Only 4 men were left, but 2 more vanished and another went mad. After encountering Dracula, that man chose to throw himself into the sea. The captain saw the vampire too and decided to go down with the ship. He tied himself to the wheel, clutching a crucifix, and died long before the ship reached land. On the day of the captain's funeral, Lucy becomes restless. She has been sleepwalking more and more, and her condition is worsening. That same day, Mr. Swales is found dead. His neck is broken, and his face is frozen in a look of pure terror. Chapter 8. One night, Mina wakes up and finds that Lucy's bed is empty. She goes to the church, thinking Lucy might be sitting at that favorite spot in the graveyard. From a distance, Mina sees Lucy lying back on the bench, and a dark figure with glowing red eyes is bent over her. But by the time Mina reaches the spot, the figure has vanished. Lucy seems to be asleep but is gasping for breath. Mina wraps her in a shawl and helps her back home. When Lucy wakes, Mina notices 2 small red marks, like pinpricks, on her neck. Over the next few nights, Mina locks their bedroom door to stop Lucy from going out in her sleep. One day, while they are out walking, the girls see a figure with red glowing eyes watching them. That night, Mina wakes to find Lucy sitting up in bed, pointing at the window. Mina looks out and sees a large bat flapping in the moonlight. In the following days, Lucy becomes pale and the marks on her neck grow larger. Mina becomes very worried and decides to call a doctor soon if Lucy doesn't improve. Meanwhile, the solicitor in Whitby, who received the wooden boxes from the ship, arranges for them to be delivered to Carfax, the estate that Dracula has purchased. Then, news arrives that Jonathan has been found in a hospital in Budapest, Hungary. He is suffering from brain fever. Mina immediately prepares to travel and be with him. At the same time, Dr. Seward notices that Renfield is acting even more strangely. One night, Renfield is found at the Carfax estate, pressed up against the door of the ruined chapel. He is calling out to his master and promising to obey him. The staff bring Renfield back to the asylum, and Dr. Seward orders that he be chained and placed in a straitjacket. Chapter 9. Harker cannot remember what happened to him in Transylvania. He believes the truth is written in his journal, but he is too afraid to read it. Instead, he gives the journal to Mina and makes her promise never to speak of what it contains. Harker and Mina decide to marry right away. Mina seals the diary with wax and promises to open it only in a true emergency. Lucy writes a letter to congratulate Mina and tells her that Arthur has joined her in Whitby. Meanwhile, Renfield becomes more disturbed while locked up in the asylum. He keeps whispering that he is waiting for his master. A few days later, he escapes again and is found at the door of the chapel at Carfax. When Dr. Seward and his attendants arrive to bring him back, Renfield becomes aggressive, but suddenly calms down when he sees a large bat flying across the moon. Lucy returns from Whitby, but her health is getting worse. Her throat is very sore. Arthur is worried and asks Dr. Seward to examine her. Seward visits Lucy but cannot figure out what is wrong. So he calls for his old teacher, Professor Van Helsing from Amsterdam. Van Helsing examines Lucy and agrees something is very wrong. She has lost a lot of blood, but he also cannot find the exact cause. Lucy begins to recover slightly for a few days, but then her condition worsens again. Dr. Seward sends an urgent message begging Van Helsing to come back at once. Helsing performs a blood transfusion from Arthur to help save Lucy. He tells Seward to stay up all night and watch over her. But when Helsing returns after 2 days, he finds that Lucy is even worse. She has lost a shocking amount of blood and her gums have pulled back from her teeth. He performs a second transfusion, this time with Seward giving his blood. He also makes a wreath out of garlic flowers and places it around Lucy's neck to protect her. But that night, Lucy's mother removes all the garlic flowers from Lucy's room and opens the windows to let in fresh air. When Helsing and Seward arrive the next morning, they find Lucy horribly weak and drained. This time, Helsing gives his own blood to her. He warns Lucy's mother never to remove anything from the room again. He also says he will stay with Lucy for the next few nights. For the next 4 days, Lucy feels much better, though she keeps hearing the sound of something flapping angrily outside her window at night. Meanwhile, a large wolf escapes from the zoological gardens. It returns the next morning, covered in broken glass. Back at the asylum, Renfield attacks Dr. Seward with a knife and cuts his wrist. Then he bends down and licks up the blood like a dog, whispering over and over, "The blood is life." At the same time, Van Helsing sends a telegram telling Seward to watch Lucy that night because he is going to Amsterdam for a day. But the message is delayed and Seward doesn't receive it in time. That night, Lucy's mother sleeps beside her. Suddenly, the window shatters and the head of a huge wolf appears. Terrified, Lucy's mother rips the garlic wreath from Lucy's neck and suffers a fatal heart attack. As Lucy loses consciousness, she sees the wolf pulling its head back through the window. The 4 housemaids rush in, shocked by the sight of their dead mistress. They go to the dining room to calm themselves with some wine, but the wine is drugged and they all fall unconscious. Chapter 12. The 2 doctors arrive the next day, but all the doors are locked. They are forced to break in through a window. Inside, they find the 4 maids unconscious, Lucy's mother dead, and Lucy close to death. Seward wakes the maids and gives Lucy a warm bath to revive her. She needs another blood transfusion, but neither doctor has enough blood left to give. Just then, Quincy Morris arrives with a message from Arthur and offers his own blood to save Lucy. Helsing finds Lucy's diary, which describes what happened the night before. While Lucy sleeps, he places the diary back on her chest. In her sleep, Lucy tries to tear it apart, but Helsing manages to save it. The next day, Her teeth look longer and sharper. Arthur arrives, but Seward fears Lucy may not live through the day. Meanwhile, Mina and Harker have returned to England. Harker is now a junior partner in Mr. Hawkins' firm. After Hawkins passes away, he leaves everything he owns to the Harkers. At the same time, Renfield sees two men carrying large boxes of earth to the Carfax estate. He attacks them but is quickly overpowered and brought back to the asylum. Back at Lucy's home, her condition worsens. While asleep, she pulls off the garlic wreath again. Her canine teeth are now very sharp. Seward sees a bat flying outside the window. The marks on her neck have disappeared. Helsing says the end is near and Arthur is called in. Lucy, barely conscious, asks Arthur to kiss her. He leans in, but Helsing stops him. At first, Lucy becomes furious, but after a short sleep, she returns to her gentle self. She calls Helsing her true friend, asks him to protect Arthur, and begs for peace. Arthur kisses her forehead, and Lucy dies. Chapter 13. Lucy and her mother are buried together. Before the funeral, Helsing covers Lucy's coffin and body with garlic and places a crucifix in her mouth. He also asks Arthur for Lucy's diary, hoping it might give some clue about what caused her death. Meanwhile, after arriving in London, Mina and Jonathan Harker see a tall, fierce-looking man with a black moustache and beard. Jonathan is sure that the man is Count Dracula. He suffers another nervous fit and remembers nothing afterwards. Worried about him, Mina decides to read his journal from Transylvania to understand what he went through. But that evening, when they get home, Mina receives a telegram telling her that Lucy has died. 3 days after Lucy's funeral, strange things begin happening near Lucy's grave. A mysterious woman has been seen in the area. She lures children away for a short time and they return later with small wounds on their necks. Chapter 14. Mina reads Jonathan's journal and is deeply disturbed by what it says. It was written in shorthand. Therefore, she transcribes it so others can read it if needed. Soon after, Helsing visits Mina to ask about what happened before Lucy's death. Mina is impressed by the doctor and decides to give him Jonathan's journal. Helsing reads it and returns the next day to visit the Harkers. His belief in Jonathan helps lift Jonathan's spirits, and some of his memories from Transylvania begin to come back. At the asylum, Renfield returns to his old habits of collecting flies and spiders. Seward meets with Van Helsing. They talk about the possible link between Lucy's death and the recent attacks on local children. Helsing believes that Lucy might have become a vampire, bitten by a bat, and slowly changed into one. He explains that there are many strange things in the world, and people must keep an open mind. Seward thinks that whatever killed Lucy is now attacking the children. But Helsing says it's likely that Lucy herself is the one harming them. Chapter 15. Seward goes with Van Helsing to examine one of the children who was attacked. The wounds are almost exactly like the ones Lucy had. That night, Helsing and Seward break into the Lucy's family tomb and discover that Lucy's coffin is empty. Just before sunrise, they see a white figure moving through the graveyard. The next day, they return and find Lucy's body back in the coffin. She looks even more beautiful than she did in life. Helsing explains to Seward that Lucy has become a vampire, one of the undead. He places garlic and a crucifix in the tomb to keep her there. Helsing then tells Arthur what has happened and explains what they must do. They need to open Lucy's tomb, drive a stake through her heart, cut off her head, and fill her mouth with garlic. At first, Arthur is shocked and refuses to let them harm Lucy's body, but eventually he agrees to go to the tomb and see for himself. Chapter 16. That night, Helsing, Seward, Arthur, and Quincy Morris return to Lucy's tomb. They find the coffin empty again. Helsing seals the vault, and the men hide nearby to wait. Soon they see a white figure carrying a child. It is Lucy. At Helsing's signal, the men surround her. Lucy drops the child, who has a bite on his neck but is still alive. She calls out to Arthur, trying to lure him toward her. Arthur begins to move, almost as if under a spell, but Helsing stops him with a crucifix. Lucy tries to get back into her tomb but is blocked. Helsing asks Arthur for permission to end Lucy's curse, and Arthur agrees. Helsing opens the vault, and Lucy slips inside. The next day, the men return. Arthur drives a stake through Lucy's heart. Her body moves and lets out a terrible scream. But when it's over, her sharp vampire teeth are gone, and her face looks peaceful. Arthur and Quincy leave, and Helsing cuts off Lucy's head and fills her mouth with garlic to make sure she cannot return as a vampire. Helsing then tells the men that they must now hunt down and destroy Count Dracula. Chapter 17. At Van Helsing's request, Harker and Mina stay at Seward's asylum. Mina types up Seward's diary and adds notes about Lucy's death. Seward reads the Harkers' journals and realizes that Dracula now lives at Carfax, a nearby estate. He also begins to suspect that Renfield's strange behavior is linked to Dracula's presence. Harker investigates the delivery of Dracula's boxes filled with earth. He finds that all 50 were sent to Carfax. Harker has now fully recovered from his time in Transylvania. The next day, Arthur and Quincy Morris arrive at the asylum to join the others. Chapter 18. With Seward's permission, Mina visits Renfield. Before she enters, Renfield quickly swallows all of his flies and spiders. He is calm, polite, and speaks sensibly with Mina. Van Helsing arrives at the asylum, and the entire group meets to discuss what they have learned from reading the journals and papers. Van Helsing warns them of the grave danger they face. Failure means becoming a vampire and facing eternal damnation. Still, they must remain committed. He explains Dracula's powers: incredible strength, night vision, invisibility, shape-shifting into mist, bat, wolf, or dust, weather control, and the ability to summon animals. However, he can be repelled by garlic, crucifixes, and holy wafers. Dracula must return to his coffin at sunrise and can only enter a place if invited. He can be killed by a sacred bullet, a stake through the heart, and decapitation. They must track down his 50 boxes of earth to destroy him. The men decide to search Carfax to count the boxes. Just then, Quincy Morris spots a bat and fires his gun at it. Before they leave, an attendant says Renfield wants to speak to them. Renfield, speaking clearly and sanely, begs to be released, warning of terrible consequences if they don't. Despite his plea, Seward refuses his release. Chapter 19. Armed with crucifixes, garlic, electric lamps, knives, and guns, The men break into Dracula's estate at Carfax. Inside the chapel, they are overwhelmed by an unpleasant smell. They discover that 21 of the 50 boxes of earth are missing. There is no sign of Dracula. Suddenly, rats begin to swarm the chapel, but the men blow a whistle, summoning dogs to drive the rats away. Van Helsing says they must now track down the missing boxes. Back at the asylum, Van Helsing tries again to speak with Renfield, but Renfield curses him and refuses to talk. Meanwhile, Mina is growing more anxious each day. She complains of terrible dreams. One night, she wakes up in the asylum to strange sounds coming from Renfield's room and finds her window open. Outside, she sees a thin mist drifting across the yard toward the building. She falls asleep again, and when she wakes, she sees a cloudy form in her room and a pale white face leaning over her. She cannot tell whether it was real or just a dream. Chapter 20. Harker's investigation shows that 12 of Dracula's missing boxes of earth were placed in 2 London houses. He tracks the remaining 9 boxes to a house in Piccadilly, a London suburb. Harker realizes Dracula's strategy to spread the boxes throughout the city so he can move freely and safely. That evening, the group meets to decide how to recover the boxes. They are concerned about how to break into houses located in such busy neighborhoods without being noticed. They agree that they must find another method to approach and destroy the boxes. They begin planning a coordinated attack to destroy all 50 boxes in a single day, during the hours between sunrise and sunset when Dracula is weakest. Van Helsing continues researching supernatural methods to use against the vampire. The next night, the asylum attendants hear a terrible scream. They rush to Renfield's cell and find him lying on the floor, covered in blood. Chapter 21. Renfield is found dying, his face crushed and bleeding, and his back broken. Seward quickly calls for Helsing, who performs emergency surgery so Renfield can speak before he dies. Renfield explains that Dracula had been visiting him often, offering him insects and small animals in exchange for loyalty. On the night the men went to Carfax, Dracula appeared and promised Renfield countless lives if he invited him into the asylum. Renfield let Dracula in, but then Dracula did not keep his promise. Later, after Mina visited, Renfield saw how pale she looked and realized Dracula was draining her life. Furious, he tried to stop the vampire when he entered again, but Dracula overpowered him and left him near death. The men race to the Harker's room, break down the locked door, and find Harker unconscious. Mina is being forced to drink blood from a wound in Dracula's chest. When Dracula sees them, he tries to attack, but Helsing holds up a communion wafer and the others raise crucifixes. Dracula flees, turning into a bat. Morris follows and sees it fly toward Carfax. Back in the house, the men discover Dracula has destroyed their documents, but they had hidden copies in a safe. Mina explains that Dracula threatened to kill Jonathan if she resisted. He drank her blood and then made her drink his. She now fears that she is contaminated and unworthy of her husband. Chapter 22. Mina fears she will endanger the group and says she would rather die than harm them. Van Helsing warns her not to kill herself, explaining that if she did, she would become one of the undead and be even more dangerous. Mina agrees to stay alive and fight for her soul. The group plans their next move. They will destroy Dracula's boxes of earth, starting with those in the Carfax and Piccadilly houses. Before they leave, Van Helsing protects Mina's room with communion wafers. When he places one on her forehead, it burns her, leaving a scar, proof that Dracula has corrupted her and that holy objects now cause her pain. The men go to Carfax and place a communion wafer in each of the remaining boxes to make them unusable. They then go to Piccadilly, where Arthur and Quincy hire a locksmith to break into the house. Inside, they find only 8 of the 9 expected boxes. They also discover keys to Dracula's other properties. Arthur and Quincy quickly head off to sterilize the boxes in those locations. Chapter 23. While waiting for Quincy and Arthur to return, the 3 men receive an urgent message from Mina. Dracula has left Carfax and is heading toward them. Since it is daytime, he is in human form and without his supernatural powers. About 30 minutes later, Quincy and Arthur return and report that they have sterilized the 12 boxes at the other 2 houses. This means that 49 out of the 50 boxes have been purified. Only one remains, and they must find it. Van Helsing believes that Dracula won't expect them to act so quickly. When the vampire sees that his boxes at Carfax are useless, he will likely come to Piccadilly next. The men wait for him there, and Dracula arrives. Though weakened, he is still very strong and fast. Harker tries to stab him but misses. Seward holds up a crucifix and forces Dracula to retreat. The vampire jumps through the window and escapes into the asylum courtyard. Before leaving, he mocks the men and warns that their women will soon become his followers. Back at the asylum, Mina urges the group to remember that Dracula still has a soul. They must destroy him not in hatred, but as an act of mercy. She then asks Van Helsing to hypnotize her. She believes her connection with Dracula can reveal his location. Under hypnosis, Mina senses that Dracula is asleep in one of the boxes. On a ship at sea, Helsing decides to find out where the ship is headed. Chapter 24. The group learns that Dracula and his final box of earth are headed to Varna, the same Russian port he sailed from 3 months earlier. Van Helsing decides they will travel by land to reach the port before the ship arrives. Quincy Morris suggests they bring Winchester rifles in case they encounter wolves. The professor believes Dracula's retreat is only temporary. After experiencing London with so many possible victims, Dracula will want to return. They must go east and destroy him before that happens. Van Helsing privately tells Seward that time is running out. Mina is already starting to change. Her teeth are becoming sharper, and her eyes sometimes show a coldness they never had before. The scar on her forehead, burned by the holy wafer, is still visible. Van Helsing fears that Mina's psychic connection with Dracula could become dangerous. If Helsing can read Dracula's thoughts through Mina, then Dracula might also be able to read hers. To protect their plans, Helsing suggests not telling Mina everything. But Mina insists on staying with the group. She explains that she can help through hypnosis, and more importantly, she must not be left alone, because if Dracula calls to her, she will have no choice but to obey. The group agrees. Mina will go with them. Chapter 25. Mina makes the men promise that if she turns into a vampire, they will kill her to save her soul. She even asks Jonathan to read the burial service for her now, in case she dies. 4 days later, on October 15th, the group travels to Varna by the Orient Express, hoping to arrive before Dracula's ship. As they wait, Mina grows weaker each day. After more than a week, they receive bad news. Dracula's ship has skipped Varna and instead arrived at Galatz, another port. The group is disappointed, but it quickly boards the next train to Galatz. Van Helsing suspects that Dracula used his psychic link with Mina to learn about their plans. Still, he believes the Count won't expect them to follow him into his home territory. Chapter 26. In her latest trance, Mina reveals that Dracula is still traveling on the river. Helsing thinks the vampire will struggle to reach his castle because both running water and sunlight are dangerous for him. He hopes they can reach Galatz before the box moves again. But they arrive too late. The ship's captain says a man named Emmanuel took the box and gave it to a trader, Skinsky. Soon after, Skinsky is found dead with his throat torn out. The group doesn't know what to do next. Mina studies the situation and predicts that Dracula will travel along the Seret River to the Bistutsa River, which leads near the Borgo Pass. To stop him, the group splits up. Arthur and Harker take a steamboat. Quincy and Seward follow on horseback. And Helsing and Mina ride a train toward Dracula's castle. Harker doesn't like being apart from Mina and fears for her safety, but Van Helsing needs her help to find the spots in the castle that must be purified. Otherwise, Dracula might return to sleep there for centuries. While traveling, Arthur and Harker hear about a large, fast boat ahead. They believe it's Dracula's. Meanwhile, Mina and Helsing arrive at Veresti and continue to the castle by horse and carriage. Chapter 27. As Mina and Van Helsing get closer to the mountains, night falls. Van Helsing sets up camp and protects Mina with a circle made of crushed holy wafers. When he tries to hypnotize her again, it no longer works. That night, 3 vampire women appear and try to lure Mina outside. But she stays safely inside the circle. Helsing also stays inside the circle, but the horses are not so lucky. They die from fear. At sunrise, the vampire women vanish. Van Helsing reaches Dracula's castle and breaks the doors so he cannot be trapped inside. In the old chapel, he finds the graves of the 3 vampire women. He performs a cleansing ritual and kills them with a wooden stake. Their bodies turn to dust. He also finds Dracula's tomb and purifies it. Before leaving, he uses the wafers to block all the doors so the Count can never return. After that, Helsing and Mina travel east through the snowy mountains. Using binoculars, Helsing sees a group of gypsies with a wagon and also spots Seward and Quincy riding from the north. He guesses that Harker and Arthur are coming from the other direction. All 6 people meet at the wagon at the same time. Helsing makes a protective circle around Mina and gets ready for a fight. Harker and Arthur stop the gypsies with their rifles just as Quincy and Seward arrive with their guns. The group attacks the gypsies, guarding Dracula's box. Quincy is stabbed, but he fights through the pain and reaches the box. Harker throws the box to the ground and together he and Quincy open it. Inside is the feared Count Dracula. Harker cuts Dracula's throat while Quincy stabs him in the heart. Dracula dies and his body crumbles to dust. The castle glows red in the sunset. They have destroyed Dracula just in time. In the end, he has a peaceful look on his face. The gypsies run away in fear. Quincy is badly wounded. He dies shortly after. Before dying, he points out that the scar on Mina's forehead is gone. 7 years later, Mina and Harker have a son named Quincy, born on the anniversary of the real Quincy's death. Arthur and Seward are both happily married. Their adventure is recorded in their journals, though even they find it hard to believe sometimes. So that brings us to the end of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Do let us know how you feel about the story, and if you like this content, subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. So till we meet again, this is Monami Mukherjee signing off. Good night.